Hey guys, today we're going to make 6 beautiful tartelettes using amazing savory and sweet recipes. We're going to make a black bone marrow tartelette, a chocolate and caramel tartelette, an apricot and carrot tartelette, a Carabino shrimp tartelette, a Bezel Tartelette, and the final recipe is a Scallop Tartelette. Be sure to subscribe, because I'm giving away the full new tartelette collection from Mole Brothers to a random subscriber, so you can create all these lovely recipes at home. So, let's begin. First, the apricot and carrot tartelettes. Peel a carrot and cut it in half. Then cut 100 grams in even pieces. Transfer it into a saucepan. Now cut some apricot in half and remove the pit. In total you'll need 300 grams of cleaned apricots. Then cut it in even pieces as well and add it to the carrots. Also add 2 cinnamon sticks and 40 grams of ginger syrup. Now cover the pan with a lid and bring this to a simmer. Once it's simmering, turn down the heat and let it simmer on a low heat for around 20 minutes. The apricot needs to be soft and the carrot needs to be cooked. After that, remove the cinnamon sticks and transfer it into a blender. Also add 20 grams of glucose, 80 grams of icing sugar, 100 grams of isomalt sugar and a knife tip of xanthan gum. Now blend this till smooth. Meanwhile, pick 2 grams of marigold leaves. These are super flavorful. Then add the leaves to the blender and blend it for another 30 seconds. When that's done, pour it into a bowl and let it cool down in your fridge. Now spread it on a silicone sheet using a stencil and level it with a palette knife. Then remove the stencil and let it dry at 90 degrees Celsius for at least 3 hours. Once dry and still hot, gently remove the discs from the sheet and shape them with a tartelette mold. Give the discs some more heat when necessary to prevent them from breaking. Then gently take it out of the mold and keep it dry and covered for later. Here I serve it with a cream cheese cream, a toasted carrot and apricot compote, a ginger gel, pistachio nuts and beautiful marigold leaves and flowers. Now the Bezel Tartelette. First pick enough basil leaves for 20 grams of leaves. Transfer them into a blender and also add 20 grams of beaten egg, 10 grams of olive oil, 10 grams of butter, 5 grams of sugar and 2 grams of salt. Blend this till smooth. Once smooth, transfer 80 grams of flour in your worktop and use the bowl to make a well in the middle. Fill it with the smooth basil mixture. Now mix it and knead it into a nice dough. Then cover it and let it rest in your fridge for at least 1 hour. After that, flour your worktop and roll out the dough that is around 2 to 3 mm thin. Now cut it with an oval cutter. Place the dough on your tartelette mold and press the top half on there. Then cut any excess dough off using your cutter and while putting some pressure on the mold, bake it at 150 degrees Celsius for around 50 minutes. Once baked, use a microplane or a fine grater to trim the sides. Then you can keep them covered for later. Here I serve it with marinated peach, a lime gel, a basil and verbena oil, a ricotta cream and some beautiful and delicious lime and basil leaves. Now for the Carabino Tartelettes. First separate the heads from the tails of 3 carabineros and peel the tails. Also remove the intestines. The tails I later on use to make a tartare to fill the tartelette. Then crush or blend the carabinero heads into a fine paste. The finer the better. Now add a drizzle of oil to a hot pan and pan fry the carabinero on a high heat to color it. Once it starts to color, add 3 grams of salt and 70 grams of tomato paste. Pan fry this for another 3 to 4 minutes. After that, add 120 grams of butter and 3 sprigs of basil and turn down the heat. Let it simmer on the lowest heat for 30 minutes. Then remove the basil and blend it as smooth as possible. Once that's done, pass the butter through a fine sieve and let it drip as long as possible so you don't waste a single drop. Now cover a tray with a kitchen paper and place your carabinero solids on top. Spread it and then let it dry at 60 degrees Celsius for a couple of hours. Then transfer it into a blender and blend it into a fine powder. Keep the powder covered for later. Now transfer 80 grams of flour into a bowl and add 40 grams of the carabinero butter, 5 grams of sugar, 2 grams of salt, 20 grams of egg yolk and 5 grams of the carabinero powder. Then mix it and knead it into a nice dough. I do this in a bowl because the carabinero will color your worktop and it's super hard to clean. Now let it rest for at least 2 hours before rolling it out on a floured surface. Cut it with a round cutter and press the dough disc on the tartelette mold. Then press the top half of the mold on the bottom half and cut any excess dough with the shape cutter. Now put some pressure on the mold and bake it at 160 degrees Celsius for around 50 minutes. When the dough has completely dried out, you can shave the top with a microplane or a fine grater. Here I serve the tartelettes with a tartare cut from the Carabino tails that's seasoned with salt, lime zest and olive oil. I added a little dot of salted citrus gel, and once covered, I decorated it with salted herbs and marigold flower petals. Now the bone marrow tartelettes. Place 250 grams of bone marrow on a metal tray and toast it at 200 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. You can also do this on a barbecue for a good smoky flavor. Then let it cool down for 5 minutes before taking the marrow out of the bone. Weigh 40 grams into a blender and also add 30 grams of beef stock, 2 grams of squid ink, 5 grams of sugar, 8 grams of egg yolk and a gram of salt. Blend this till smooth. Then pour 85 grams of flour on your worked up and make a well in the middle. Fill it with the marrow mixture. Now mix it and then knead it into a nice dough. Then cover it and let it rest in your fridge for at least 1 hour. After that, flour your worked up and roll out the dough till it's around 2 to 3 millimeters thin. Now cut it with a round cutter. Place the dough in your tartelette mold and press the top half on there. Then cut any excess dough off using your cutter, and while putting some pressure on the mold, bake it at 150 degrees Celsius for around 50 minutes. Once baked, use a microplane or a fine grater to trim the sides. Then you can keep them covered for later. Here I serve it with a nice beef tartare that's seasoned with chives, tomato ketchup, Tabasco, Worcester sauce, capers, salt and pepper, and olive oil. The bottom of the tartelette is filled with the tartare, and then I pipe some marrow mayonnaise on top and decorate it with nasturtium leaves, sorrel leaves, salotti blossom, alyssium flowers and marigold leaves. Now the caramel and chocolate tartelette. Mix 200 grams of sugar with 40 grams of water and 10 grams of glucose. Heat this up till the sugar starts to caramelize. It needs to be a light golden caramel. Then add 100 grams of hazelnuts and while stirring caramelize it on a low to medium heat for 4 to 5 minutes. Be careful that the caramel doesn't burn. Once it's done, pour it on a silicone sheet. Now level it and let it cool down completely. Then break it into smaller pieces and transfer it into a blender. Blend it into a fine powder. After that, add 25 grams of cocoa powder with 50 grams of egg white and blend it till it's an even and smooth batter. You need to be careful that it doesn't heat up too much from the friction. This will cook the egg white. Then spread it on a silicone sheet using a round stencil and level it with a palette knife. Now remove the stencil and bake the batter at 150 degrees Celsius for around 15 minutes. Then when still hot, gently remove them from the sheet and shape the disc with the tartelette mold. Here I serve it with an amaretto cream, a caramelized white chocolate crumble, a sweet melon gel, salted fudge, crispy bronze leaves and citrus leaves. Then the final recipe, the scallop tartelette. First open up some scallops. The scallop I use later on to fill the tartelette, the beard for a scallop cream and the coral for the tartelette dough. These corals were super small, but we can still use them. Now for the dough. Mix 20 grams of beaten egg with 10 grams of olive oil, 10 grams of butter, 20 grams of the scallop corals, 5 grams of black sesame seeds and 10 grams of samphire. Now blend this till smooth. Then pour 85 grams of flour in your worked up and make a well in the middle. Fill it with the scallop mixture. Now mix it and then knead it into a nice dough. Then cover it and let it rest in your fridge for at least 1 hour. After that, flour your worked up and roll out the dough till it's around 2 to 3 millimeters thin. Now cut it with a round cutter. Place the dough in your tartelette mold and press the top half on there. Then cut any excess dough off using your cutter, and while putting some pressure on the mold, bake it at 150 degrees Celsius for around 50 minutes. Once baked, use a microplane or a fine grater to trim the sides. Then you can keep them covered for later. Here I serve it with a scallop tartare, a scallop cream and some beautiful alyssium flowers. I use the white flowers and the purple flowers. Okay guys, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please let me know in the comments what you want to see next. Like and share the video and be sure to subscribe if you want to win the beautiful new tartelette collection from more butters. I'll be announcing the winner next week, so stay tuned. And as always, bon appetit!